Yeah.
whenever we use Restream and I hit the go live button, it's like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like we just went through it. Hopefully it actually is working because I got several errors and then I turned some things off. So hopefully it's happening, Matt.
It's over on Twitch. It's happening.
One day we're going to be like professional streamers where like we actually come in, like we have like we're prepared. People are like excited. They're like,
but that day is not today, my friend.
That is not today. Like, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to like, I kind of feel the more we do this, I guess like, the idea of like having a director behind the scenes and like go, and then like reading off a teleprompter, like it's a skill. It's like people like, it's a real skill. I'm impressed.
Yeah. Well, I think it's part of our brand to be kind of rough and tumble,
Isn't that what you do when you just make mistakes? You just call it's like, well, it's part of our brand.
Yeah.
It's like
people don't want too much polish.
I don't want that.
Nobody wants too much polish from us. That's what I keep telling myself.
All right, Matt. I think we did the pre-show. We have an exciting lineup of topics. AWS being one of them, and we've got several others.
Do we hit?
So should we not waste any time?
Do we need to start announcing on Mastodon too?
That's a good question.
Mastodon. That's the thing I don't really get about Mastodon.
Hold on, that's going to be our Mastodon subject. We have to wait. We can't we haven't started. You're getting ahead of me like Kote. So,
we hit the Mastodon. We hit the. Oh my goodness.
All right, you ready? I think we're ready. Ready for the ready?
We didn't post to Software Defined Talk channel.
Oh, that's a good point. We didn't.
Yeah, I got it.
You got it. That's good. That's a good point. Gosh, man, so many errors. So many problems. Matt is typing.
Send. Show that chicken.
Okay, there we go. Now we're really ready. Chicken. So you're going to talk about chicken at the end? Is that what the deal is? Is that why people should stay?
No. I clicked. When you use the here on Slack, it tried to tell me something about a chicken, and I clicked on it so fast I have no idea. I probably accepted a change in the EULA.
Like all changes in the EULA should be sent via emoji. That would be
nobody reads that stuff. That's why they're not enforceable in court.
Did you happen to see in the whole FTX saga, like one of the things that they were talking about lack of governance was that when they approved expense reports, like the person approving it would just respond with an emoji, right? And they were talking about and of course they were like, this is crazy. They didn't have any controls. The person responded with an emoji. And I was like, that was the one part where I was like, probably good enough. Like the fact that you picked out an emoji and gave it like the thumbs up.
It depends what the emoji is, really.
Yeah, but it's like,
what am I supposed to do with,
Yeah, I guess it's true. Like,
with
I guess
heart,
thumbs up, thumbs down. But yeah, once you get outside of the basic emoji language, maybe it opens. It's open to interpretation. But I don't know. That was one of the things where I was like, why not emojis? Like, it didn't feel that crazy. I was like, I don't know. Is it all that bad?
The English language is evolving.
That's right. All right, you ready, Matt? Ready to get going?
Sure.
Okay. Let me write down. Let me make a little note of what time we started, so I can ignore these. There you go, Matt. There you go.
FinOps water.
This is good. Nah, that doesn't bring in the ratings. I don't know what will.
Yeah, it's all part of our brand.
It's part of our brand. You know what that is? That needs to become a show title. Our brand. All right, ready? All coughed out there.
Ready. Yeah. Well. Okay.
All right. Matt, it's the holiday season, and it means you are on a countdown. I'd say you, as you were telling me, I believe you're bringing your entire family is going to return for Christmas break. Is that? Can you confirm or deny that?
Well, someone said the dog is not going to make it. It's the dog is in for a traumatic holidays. 17 days of boarding. So that's
kennel time.
Kennel time, and he doesn't even like 1 or 2 days. So we'll come back, and he will be. Hopefully, he'll be better behaved.
Now, have you explored like some type of house sitting, dog sitting situation, or did you just commit him to to be institutionalized.
Well, we should have gone for some sort of house sitting, but I mean, who really wants to board a poorly behaved beagle for 17 days?
Well,
I
we
guess I
have
shouldn't sell it that way, but
yeah, I was gonna say one, we need to workshop the messaging a little bit. We have the way we said it is like we have a new puppy that's very exciting and cute. Would you like your we have some friends? Would you like to have your child take care of it and we'll pay your child pay, right? As like a learning experience. And that way the dog gets to live in like a family home for a week.
oh
That's what
yeah,
we did.
yeah.
And we successfully sold that as a proposition. So we'll see how it goes. I don't know if the
That
puppy will but you gotta just that's what you gotta sell it. Like, would you like this cute animal? And then you have to then relate it back to like, I can help your family by providing an opportunity to learn how to take care of a dog or something along those lines. Have you I mean that's the kind of sales pitch we went with.
yeah. No, I mean, we should have done that. I mean, he's definitely, his finest feature is his appearance.
Mhm.
And
Cuteness, cuteness,
not
yep.
his not his personality. So yeah, we should have
Isn't that
sold
when you
people.
break it down for the most part, like it's the only feature of dog
No,
that
no,
really
no, no.
matters?
You
I
get
think it's the
some.
only thing that matters, the cuteness.
Well, no, no. I mean, the dog's personality is actually probably more important, right? I mean, because like he's kind of obnoxious. He grabs things off counters. He barks at everybody who comes by our house. Um, he chews things up still. So that's kind of hard to sell. But then when you look at him, you're like, that is just a fine looking dog.
So would
I
you
don't know.
rather have a cute, fine-looking dog
Nope.
or a dog that's well behaved with a quote unquote good personality?
I think I'd rather have a better behaved dog.
Really? Okay. Well, I
Yeah.
think I mean that's
I
probably
mean,
very
so
savvy
so so
for uh-huh.
our last dog had canine flank alopecia. I mean, it looks like mange, right? He was going
Like I don't even know
bald
what
on
that
the
like
side.
you have to dissect the whole sentence. Like, is that some type of skin disease by dogs?
Yes,
Fur
yes.
disease? Like
He
what
was
does that
going
even mean?
bald on the sides of his body. So, I mean, people were
Oh,
always like, "Oh,
jeez.
that poor dog."
Uh-huh.
But personality-wise, an angel. So, we went from a hideous dog to like, a best in show looking dog. But you know, I mean, he's not completely he's got his good moments, but boarding is going to be rough for him. We'll just leave
I
it at
think it's
that.
boarding for all dogs. So it's like every
Well, that's
time
the
we take
thing.
it, it's there's no like I think the whole act is just like really that's kind of what I was going before. It's like the best solution is like friend of the family, whatever
Yes.
house. Like that's just what you're always going for. As soon as you go to like it's but to be fair to the dogs, it's like no one wants to go to some type of institution, right? It's just like I mean, like I don't think any mammal right wants to be
That's
like
what's weird.
institutionalized. So it's like what like but there's just a point where like I have no
No.
other option. I have
No,
to
no, no,
take you
no.
here.
Our last dog, like, he loved boarding because
Oh, really?
he wanted to be around other dogs. We'd go to the dog park, and
Mhm.
he was like, we could not pull him away. He wanted to be around other dogs. He loved chasing and playing, and so, like, when we took him to the boarding drop-off place, he would be like, he wouldn't even look back. He'd just bolt to like, get on the bus. He's ready to go. He's like, and then, when we picked him up, he'd be happy and all, but we drive him to the boarding place and he's like, see you later, folks. He would never even look back. And this dog is like, he doesn't want any part of it. So the last
It's
dog
looks like he's like a
loved
camp
boarding.
dog. He's like, "Oh, I'm going
Oh yeah.
camp. I'm gonna go see my friends, and I'm
Yeah,
gonna see the
exactly.
counselors, and they're gonna walk
Yeah,
me, and they're gonna feed me, and we're gonna play together." Right? So,
exactly. Exactly.
mm,
So some dogs do like it. Not this dog.
I'm gonna say part of the reason your dog liked your previous dog is because he was not cute, right? Because I think if he had not been
No,
treated,
he was a perfectly fine looking yellow
I
lab
know, but
mix.
like people talk about pretty privilege. I'm gonna talk about dog cute privilege. Cute
My dog has
dogs
pretty privilege. Current
don't
dog,
want to be institutionalized because they are treated so well outside home because they're just cute. Even and that's why like there's never any rules for them. No one ever like that. I'm living through this process now, so this is low therapy for me. It's like
yes,
they're
yes,
not disciplining the dog. They're just like, oh, he's so cute. He's so this. He's so this.
absolutely,
But like the dog doesn't have to like take on any type of like responsibility. Whereas
exactly,
your
and
previous dog did take on responsibility. And that's why, you know what, to use a parenting metaphor and a word that I hate, I'll be like, your dog had grit. Your
oh
dog had
yes,
fought through and was
that was a
resilient and
gritty
was
dog.
okay with
He
being institutionalized.
he was from the mean streets of Bastrop. He
Yeah,
was like a street rescue.
that's a tough area for dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
uh-huh,
And
yeah,
then he flew all the way to Melbourne. So, that'll put a dent in you. So, yeah, he was gritty,
yeah,
great personality. And the new dog is like he's like John Hamm on 30 Rock, where he lives in that bubble of good looking where people just go out of their way to do things for him. And the thing is, like, strangers are like, "Oh, can I pet your dog? He's so cute." And then my dog's like, growls at them and howls at them because he's like, leave me alone. And people are
mhm.
like, what is wrong with that dog?
Kind of a diva. So I get it. I get it. So, all right. Well, listen. What's the name of the new dog? What
Levi.
Levi? Well,
But he
listen.
has many nicknames.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing. I don't. That we won't extend the segment any further. But like, yes, the dog nicknames is a whole nother. That's an entire other subject we could go on about. But listen, on behalf of the entire Software Defined Talk audience, we hope Levi enjoys 17 days in captivity, and hopefully, he'll learn to persevere and develop some grittiness so that when you return, he'll be a little bit better behaved. That's what we're
17 days in the hole.
Now, speaking of the hole, let's talk a little bit about AWS reInvent, right? So yesterday was the full-on AWS keynote, and this was the second. I believe it's the second one by Adam Selipsky, right? And I missed it because I
Yep.
think this is 2 years ago. So I was online with a bunch of our Software Defined Talk people in the Slack. That's the only way I watch these things now, is like there's a running commentary, which is a lot of fun.
Well,
And we watched.
and apparently there was like a half-hour wait to get into the keynotes. So like that whole, just a quick side note, like, don't watch keynotes in person. Go watch them from your room,
Yeah, watch
streaming
them.
like everybody else. You have a better view. You have better seating. You can go to the bathroom. You get a cup of coffee. You could spread out on your bed, get some pillows, prop up the laptop. Just enjoy the show in the comfort of your hotel room.
Absolutely. Well, one, I guess we should start there. From what I heard, I mean, I don't know what a full attendance is, so I don't know if I have that. I've heard anywhere from 50 to 60,000 attendees. So
Yeah,
if that's not like full attendance, that's got to be like, I don't know, right there at the top. Like, I don't know how many more rooms in Vegas they have or how many more hotels, but it's very hard to get hotels, like always. And then, yeah, I've heard not only was there a long wait to get in the keynote, there's a long wait for all the sessions. Like, you have to be
yeah.
on it when you're registering your sessions this year. So that's good news in the sense of like kind of just this return to normalcy, I guess, the fact that like people feel confident to put on conferences of this size. I think that is good. Early reviews of the keynote. I guess we'll start with the harshest review I
Brutal.
saw was
Yeah.
Corey Quinn on Twitter. Just, absolutely kind of dumped all over it. His initial take was he canceled his keynote rebuttal. And he says, quote, quite simply and honestly, there's nothing I can say about today's keynote that keeps the criticism lighthearted enough. And I'm not here to hurt people's feelings, end quote. Like, oof. That's pretty brutal. So
Yeah.
I think that was a little too much. I was like, oh, I don't feel that.
Well,
but I did feel like, and part of this is like, hey, Andy Jassy's gone. We all need to accept that, me included. Like, it's just like, it's not the same, but different, and it isn't always bad. But like, my immediate thing is that it's not the same. And this is the year I really came to grips with it. Like that the Andy Jassy era is over. We need to just forget about that. We need to grade Selipsky on his own curve and maybe like let him make the keynote his own. I don't know. Matt, what were your thoughts?
Well, I did not watch it live. I read the commentary. So we had Software Defined Talk Slack had extensive. I woke up. Was it Wednesday morning, Tuesday morning, and there were pages and pages and pages of people commenting on it. I am looking forward to the bad lip reading version of the keynote. Apparently,
Yeah, Laura, I
that's in the
believe
work.
she was in the works to do it. I don't know. That was quite a commitment. If she does full 2 hours, that would be a lot.
Yeah, maybe just a best of 10 minutes. Hopefully Amazon will put out like a clip, a highlights reel of the keynote, and we can do that one. But yeah, I mean, just reading the commentary, and they post quick blog posts about all the news, and so it just sounded kind of meandering and slow. And so the I guess one of the questions would be, is it how much time should Selipsky put aside to like to punch this up? I mean, he's got a staff around him. There are
Sure he's got like an
people who
entire
work on this
team
stuff
like
for
writing
him.
this for him. Yeah, for sure.
But is it on him or is it on them? So there's going to be a postmortem, hopefully blameless after the show, and they're
They
going to
should
have
invite Corey Quinn to it.
exactly.
There you go. There you go. That'd be a good way to start a blameless postmortem reading Corey's tweets.
They'll pull up the old Google Doc and they'll bust up an outline of what went right, what went wrong, and it'll just be like Corey Quinn Twitter comments, and then so it sounded like
well, maybe we should start. We should we'll do a little postmortem here and blameless, and just like I've wrote down some stuff going through it. It's like, and we can kind of react. You can react to it. It's like, one, I just think the overall feeling is like, and this is not all on Adam. I just think it's a little disjointed given, and we're going to go through the news, at least the things that we thought were interesting. But part of it is just like, there's so many things inside of AWS at this point that putting together like a crisp story around all of it is definitely going to take a lot of effort. And, kind of, borrowing a page from Amazon in the 6-page memo, it takes a lot of editing, right? I mean, that's really what you have to do, is figure out which things aren't going to be in the keynote. Like, everyone's going to want to be on stage in some form or another, right? But if you're trying to keep it just like every sentence needs to be in the 6-page memo, but at some point, you have to just say some goes in the appendix, some is wait for later. So I think, to me, that's the first, kind of broad point to make. And then the second one is, I think this entire structure that they try to put around it, I thought was very forced. So they basically came up with 4, pictures and words. So it was vast, unfathomable, extreme, and possibility. So there was kind of the 4 pillars. And the structure of the keynotes was, they would talk about vast, and then they would talk about a story. So the first one, vast, was about space, and then there was another one about extreme, about like the trip to the South Pole, and they would sort of tell a long like historical story, and then they would tie that back as a lead in into the actual product announcements. And it just felt extremely forced. Like, this entire metaphor, I was just like, I was getting a little confused.
This is like coming up with a prom theme, right? It's like, do we do under the stars or under the sea, right? And
but they did both. Like, at one point we were in the stars, then we were at the bottom of the ocean, then we were in the South Pole, and then somehow we were in Lord of the Rings. Like, that was the 4 different things we went. And I was just like, this is crazy. Like, I just was like, why are we in the stories? Like, if you're gonna use it, maybe you just use it loosely. But like the stories were like well researched. I didn't know all of them, so it was like, but they were just long. It was just like, go ahead.
So you stayed engaged, you followed along. You're like,
I was trying to, but then I was like, we're in the South Pole, and he's talking about the ponies died, and then they brought dogs, and then like, it goes on and on and on, and then you're like, you're just like, I don't even know what we're talking about anymore. And then eventually we got back to some type of AWS thing. So my point there, I guess, again, this is blameless. It's just to say, hey, you don't need such a heavy structure, and I don't think the lead up doesn't need to be so long. Like, I said I wouldn't compare him to Jassy, but I am. But Jassy would come up with like, hey, here's 6 bullets. We're going to talk about like, here's how you move to the cloud. Here's 6 things I want you to remember about. And then he would just sort of introduce it like quickly, like, hey, you need to really think about innovation. And here's what I think about innovation. And then he would get into the announcements, right? And it's like, it just felt very natural, but it wasn't like this broad. Now Jassy would like throw it to the band, and he would just like, they would just play some arbitrarily, mostly classic rock, Gen X rock, whatever, alternative. And then he would just pick out a lyric and be like, and then he just used that lyric to segue, which I thought was both kind of funny, but it kind of worked. It was quick, right? It was just like a quick little thing. Whereas this, like these stories, I don't know, I had to go clock it, but they were each a few minutes long, and they were each a little bit like, at the end of the story, I was like, can you just pull up the console? Like, I am lost. I don't know what we're talking about, but like, I just need to know what I need to know. I don't need to know about the ponies that died in this, and I felt bad for the ponies too. I did. So that was the other part.
It would have been slightly more memorable if every story came back around to ponies.
It would have been. Well, then the other thing. Okay, so let's just say that, like, I don't think they need this big metaphor. I don't need the story lead up. So I would just chop that down. That would be one piece of feedback. The second one was, I know everybody wants customers up there talking. Like it's just like ingrained. It's always like, tell me what the customers did. But what I would say here was the customer sessions were really too short to be educational and too long to be inspirational, right? It's like what you really want when you're seeing a customer testimony is like, tell me about your company, and maybe hopefully they hook something about like, oh, I didn't know that manufacturing encountered this problem, but then tell me about like all the things that you did that involved AWS so that I know about that, and that kind of gives me a frame of reference. Whereas this was sort of like a pretty long lead up about the company, and then like just kind of like, and we used AWS to solve some problem, but in the most generic fashion possible. You're like,
Our
okay,
public
like,
cloud of choice is
and
Amazon.
each one of the stories were like, I won't go through them all, but it's just sort of like, oh, we have a ton of data in a big IT environment. And then they would then formulate, like why that is their industry problem. And then it was just like, and AWS helped us fix it. And it's like we know these problems exist. So if you're not going to go into somewhat detail, then I think you just need to be much shorter. And so here, I think they could take a page out of some other keynotes and just make like a 2-minute video of each one, right? So just make it really inspirational, like because they did have a really nice one about genetics and cancer research, and it's just like, we'll just tell the story, but make it really, really polished in a 2-minute video, and then move on to the next thing. Because it's like if you're not going to get into the details, just let us know that AWS is helping this company solve some problem. So that was I don't know, where do you stand on the video testimonial versus like I would say 7-minute executive case study? What do you like there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm struggling to figure out how much of that I could take, right? Because it has to be so probably, I'm thinking about this as someone who has like coordinated these kind of things previously, and so if you're on the team inviting a customer to come in and talk, you're probably thinking, I've got a window between 2 and 7 minutes. How long should I keep them up there? And if they have something compelling, you give them more time. And this is the same way with like industry. I'm thinking back to like KubeCon. When people pony up their $200,000 to sponsor the event, you got to give them 5 minutes of stage time. It's like, what's the minimum you can give them and what's the maximum? And you kind of need to see what the content is before you do it. When people are buying those keynote spots,
right? But I don't think these were bought. I think these
no.
Amazon doesn't trying to like.
Yeah,
Amazon trying to do good product marketing, right? Like relate to the audience, tell a customer story.
Yeah,
and I think that's where they're coming from. But now, I would say like, do the 2-minute video, have the executive on stage, and then have maybe a 2-minute kind of chat about it. Like,
patter of
because like,
hey,
that was
how did Amazon solve this problem?
It was weird. Like the transitions when Adam would come up, he would just kind of like say like, thanks so much for being here. It was great. It was just very forced. It was very weird. Whereas like, but I get it. It's so hard setting. But I think if they just came up and asked a question, and if like you were presenting, I'd be like, man, that was a great session on relating cost. I thought, I really was. And then you just ask a natural question, like, can you tell me like exactly how much money did that company save or whatever? Just come up with some type of like natural question. That way you get like the executive on stage. And of course the executive can be around to speak later and more detail at like a longer event that's situated just around that. But like trying to force them to do it, like just asking too much was my immediate thought. Like, but like, I don't know, people are going to push back on that. I know people are always like, I want to see more customers and stuff like that. But like, if you're not going to give them the time to tell me what they did with your product, then it's kind of missing the point, right? You know what I mean? It's just like, otherwise I'm just learning about your business, which is fine, but I'm not walking away with anything. I don't know. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I'm kind of like revisiting the whole idea of keynotes in general. Like, was it 2 hours long?
2 hours. 2 hours,
That's
baby.
too long. That is just too long. I mean,
right.
and that goes for like all conferences. When I see 2 hours of keynotes, I'm like, that's just too long. I mean, sure, you gotta get everything out there, but there's day 2, there's a day 3. Maybe you try to keep the opening day keynote briefer and save the less compelling customers for day 2. I don't know.
No, I think you're hitting on it though. But Microsoft, when we watched that keynote, that was an hour, and that was led by the CEO. And they interspersed like some videos as well as that. And I think this is where, and I think you're hitting on what we kind of talked about a little bit before, but was like, okay, like if you are great, like, I mean, like pick your famous, whoever you think is the best performer on stage, right? Like whoever like the top stand-up comic today is today, or whatever you want to see. Like if you're great and you got 2 great hours of material, like your favorite band, and you can go 2 straight hours, I want to see it, right?
Right.
But there's also like some editing around just like I'm not that person. And probably the best keynote transition we've seen, and I hate to use it because of cliche, but it's sort of like Steve Jobs to Tim Cook. Like Tim Cook has really never come out and tried to give the Steve Jobs part of the thing, right? He sort of like
he's
gives the
not
business
up there screaming
updates
about developers. He's
and he
just,
brings
hitting the numbers.
yeah, and he brings on other people that sort of play the role of like the inspirational technology part. And even that person is different depending on the product, right? And I think that's where Slepsky needs to go. He needs to be like, hey, listen, there's only one Jassy. I can go 2 hours with Jassy because like we're getting a lot of information at depth, and he doesn't have to be a scripted. Like, I think Jassy knew the product so well. Like he's just sort of like giving you his updates. Whereas Slepsky's clearly
got him. He was prepped better.
That's true. I think his background maybe was prep better, but Slepsky's definitely reading more, right? And it's like, listen, I don't blame him. There's a lot in here. Like, there's a lot of stuff that we're gonna kind of go through. So I think that was the other thing. It's like, hey, don't be afraid to like. If I was him, I'd make it 1 hour. I'd make it more like, hey, it's almost like I don't want to see the highlights, but it's almost like the opening agenda. It's like, here, I'm gonna make sure I hit on all the important things you know about, but then I'm gonna have someone up and I'm gonna tell you, like, you want more information on infrastructure? Go to the infrastructure keynote. You want to learn a bit more about AI? Keynote's coming up today. So it's almost like, kind of just like getting you set for the whole conference, getting you pumped up, reducing it down an hour. And also just like, and probably like, he's probably passionate about some area of AWS. Like, I think we'll talk a little bit in a second about data, because that's sort of his world of Tableau and things like that. Like maybe that's where he like gives his passionate update, but he doesn't have to do it all. So that's what I want to see next year, like more editing and a little less, I don't know, maybe just a little less length. Now, having said all that, do you think, what are the chances they cut this key down to from 2 hours next year? Like, do you think that, I feel like this is one of those things where I like to say status quo wins. It's sort of like, I feel like could Adam walk in and be like, I want it to be 1 hour? I don't know. I really don't think, I bet you the agenda is so kind of tightly, constrained at this point that like he probably couldn't do it. What do you think? Do you think he could actually do it if he wanted?
Wow. So, I mean, this kind of reflects on the greater Amazon picture. It's like they kind of have a lot of momentum in maintaining the status quo, and you see this across like I'm thinking about like retail. A lot of people are complaining about the quality going down and this and that, but it's like meanwhile 82% of American households are Prime members. So it's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But there are a lot of cracks in the foundation, and so I don't know. Does Amazon have the culture to revisit and refresh things?
But I know, like you and I, in fact, you and I have been to trade shows a bunch together, and then you've been to a lot of trade shows on your own. It's like it's like they take on a certain like, I don't know, they almost like congeal. They become so like it's just like people won't break. Like they won't do. It's almost like the pandemic.
I'm saying, when you started talking about like the engineering keynote and the AI keynote, I was like, that's what I actually want. I want him to come out and give instead of having the 4-hour hobo parade, I want 1 hour of keynote where he's like, look, AI ML. Here are the 5 bullet highlights. But you know what? So-and-so is going to speak for an hour tomorrow on just that, or 30 minutes on big data and 30 minutes on ML and whatever.
And maybe even have that person come out, right? Because you're kind of the hype man. Have that person come out and be like, this person tomorrow is going into the details. And to be fair, like there was the AI ML one today, and then there was an infrastructure one. But like part of it is like I was sort of retraining myself. It's like, oh, I need to spend, because I don't know. I just feel like the Jassy keynote was like, this is like Super Bowl. Like we gotta be ready. But now it's more like, this is more like
now it's like every other conference.
Yeah, it's kind of like every other. It's like, I need to be smarter about like, okay, what do I really care about, and move around. So, but I think if if Adam sort of embraced that, Slepsky embraced it, said, hey, listen, I want to change this keynote to be sort of like setting the table for everybody else. And I'm going to let everyone else come in and like knock it out of the park. Now, I just think it would be really difficult though, because I mean, he has an ego, and I'm sure like everyone's going to be like, well, Jassy went up there for 2 hours for 10 straight years and didn't even have notes. He just spoke, off the cuff. Right. And it's like, yeah, but I think this is where you got to be smart enough to be like, I'm not that person. Just like Tim Cook was like, I'm not going to try to go out and like tell everyone I've created magic devices like Steve Jobs, and like, they're going to kill me. So anyway, so we'll do that. All right. Well, listen, that's a lot of, that was a good blameless. I think we didn't blame anyone. I don't think we blame. We'll watch next year to see if
I think, there's, and maybe I know I didn't, maybe I was trying to be blameless. I think some of the, my pointing was at like the prep people, I don't know what, maybe Adam is just, maybe he hates public speaking. Maybe that's just
true.
not
like
his
it could
thing.
not, it may not be his thing,
like,
right?
Yeah. So it's hard to tell like how much is prep and how much is the presenter. But I think tighten it up. That's
tighten it up.
That's our
I think that's the whole thing.
Tighten it up. And look to cut 30 minutes off just to give us a little bit of just so we have less complaining to do.
Yeah. Well, no, we'll see next year. We'll just like any agile based podcast, we're gonna like we'll watch next year and be like, okay, do they just move away?
That's
do they go to 90 minutes? Like even that, like we're gonna reduce it to 90 minutes. And does he have an AWS representative other than himself on the basically in the keynote at all? To say, okay, if he does either one of those things, I'm gonna give you like, hey,
I mean, it's too big for one keynote. Right. We
so.
Totally agree on that. And so if you're going to have multiple keynotes, break it up into, the relevant subtopics, give them, 5 minutes of highlights and get through them faster.
Absolutely. Now, all right, on the actual highlights, let's take a look at some of these. So now we're going to go through all 700 no, we're not. We're going to go through the announcements that we think, for whatever reason, we believe they're relevant to us for whatever. So let's start with, I like to start at the bottom. Like in kind of like the old Jassy style is like, okay, compute. So my biggest takeaway was like, Matt, did you know there are over 100 different Graviton instances? And let me just tell you, there's a Graviton instance for everything. There's probably one built specifically for Matt Ray. I don't know if this is good or bad, because they basically announced Graviton instances for like networking, for specifically for not just machine learning, but training versus inference versus, I mean, they just went on and on. So my immediate thought was like, man, this is just too much. But then I thought about it more. I guess if it's like, if you don't have to like learn all of them and you're just kind of picking the one that you want, you are faced with a list of 100. And maybe this is something you can like from some of your pricing stuff. Like, I don't know, like how easy it is to like filter out to be like, okay, I'm doing this and I want to do it fast, but cheap. Like I don't know how much guidance they kind of give me to do that. So I was going to ask you, it's like, are you encountering people trying to like make sense of these 100 different instances? And
So over in the FinOps Slack, there was a thread about this, and it was the general consensus was they're hiding price hikes in there.
Okay. Based on the type of instance, different price.
Because generally, you'd have like the generic model, the M or the C or whatever, and then it would have like the generation, and so the and the architecture, right? So it's like what it's good for, what generation it is, the architecture, and a lot of times people be like, well, I'll go from first to second generation, and get a little bit of savings, because that tended to be what happened. And some of them are raising prices in there. And so, if don't blindly buy that, but then when it comes to optimization, you have a lot more choices. And, for vendors who are, providing recommendations on what sort of instances you should be using, there's a lot of work here. Because it's not just like, oh, do I upgrade to the new generation? Do I, now it's like, do I need any specialization around, how much RAM, how much disk write, what speed of disk write, optimize for reads, optimize for writes, how much CPU is it bursting? Is it on demand? There are a lot of toggles here, and I think a lot of folks are going to be just overwhelmed, especially as a purchaser of discounts, right? So you go in and you tell Amazon like, I want a year of M1 XLs, and they're like, are you sure you want M1s? Because it's like there's like a dozen choices, and so be careful if you're locking yourself into one particular type, because then you're going to be all your square pegs need to fit in that round hole. So you'll need a little bit of flexibility there, but it is a little daunting keeping track of all your options. I don't know how much actual savings there are to do, but once you have large fleets of machines, thousands of instances, there can be significant price differences depending on what you're running. So probably worth revisiting what you're running on from time to time.
Well, I guess the other thing is, I don't know how often, and this is kind of back to like the operator developer discussion a little bit. It's like, do the people that ultimately are kind of configuring all this to run, or at least kind of like configuring what they want to use, do they have enough knowledge of the actual workload, right, to know like, oh yeah, this should, like, we're going to get a lot of benefit out of doing like the training graviton versus the inference versus general. And it's like, because like even if the developer or the application group kind of tells you like, oh yeah, this is our ML this is our machine learning workloads, like that still may not be like, you know what I mean? Like you may, I guess I would have to test it. You're like, well, I don't know. Like, well, the machine, like what exactly inside this machine learning model are we doing? And like, how do I map up the instances? Like, it feels like that's like the decision points could be pretty far apart, right? Like, especially if the developers aren't like the ones that are actually in the console. And then if you are in the console and you don't know about all these instances, maybe you just pick the simplest one. You're like, I'll just pick the general use one, right? So
exactly.
I mean, like, what else would you do? Like,
and then
I don't know.
And then they just kind of slide in some price increases generation to generation, and nothing changed, but you upgraded your instance, and now you're paying more.
All right.
So
the net of this is like, I guess it's good they have it.
It's good to have choices,
but I do think you have to be. It's almost like you have to set aside some time here to like either do some of your own testing. Like if you are, and I guess that in itself is a good question. Like, I think you probably only make like, you're only really deviate from general if you're doing stuff like a lot and all the time. If you're just going to run something once, it's probably like just pick general and be done with it.
I mean, yeah, most people are going to stick with general. You need to get the sizing right. Make sure you're not paying too much for, unused RAM or unused CPU. So it's like, that's the first pass. And then the second pass is, first you size it, then you look at like the actual workloads. Do I need more, faster disk write or, whatever? There's a lot of room for this. And, you need ML to evaluate
I think that's
your
the
ML
natural
choices.
question is like, do I need to run an ML model on Graviton to figure out which Graviton
Well, I can assure you there are startups in this space that are coming for that.
And I'm sure, Matt, I'll just give you the location. Matt, I'm sure if I'm spending too much money, I'm sure you could help me, right? You could help me. Call Matt. Matt will give you some insight.
Well, I'm mostly focused on the open source side. So I'm all about the monitoring.
All right, fair enough. All right, we'll call somebody else then. So, okay, all right, Matt. Other things at least I threw in the compute bucket. We can argue about that. Is I don't know how important this is, but they made it on the slide there. So it's AWS Nitro in enclaves now support EKS in Kubernetes. So basically, I just take that to be if you're worried about security and you want, like, if you will, more isolation when you're running your Kubernetes, like, okay, great. Now Nitro supports it. Like, is that, I don't want to say it's like not important, but I was like, okay, check, got it, move on. I don't know, Matt. Is it more important than I'm making it out?
No. I'm on the trusted computing. I'm anti-trusted computing.
Wow, this is against your type. This is like, you're
no.
Uh-huh.
My point is, like, if you have to pay extra for trusted computing, what are the rest of these cloud workloads doing?
they're just out there running on the public internet, and everyone just looking at it,
Exactly.
watching
I
it.
mean,
Right?
if you can't trust the general workloads running on your cloud vendor not to be peeking into other people's traffic. I mean, I understand that there are regulatory concerns. Some of these things have to be on, dedicated hardware or whatever. But really, it feels like it feels kind of scammy to me, where you're paying extra for something that should be a default. I should not have to worry that other customers on a physical host might be able to peek into memory and see my stuff. Right?
I think
That's
you're
that
right.
to me,
Yeah.
that's table stakes of cloud
Yeah.
computing. I
Don't make
shouldn't
me
have
pay
to
extra
worry
for
about
security.
other.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, that's kind of my feelings on it. And I've started to see this other places where people are like, trusted computing is kind of scammy. You
Yeah.
should not have to pay extra for what should be the default.
Okay. I think it's good. Well, I guess having said all that, and at least you have it now. I guess if you were worried about it, now you have it.
Oh yeah, yeah. For
You
for the
know,
people for the people who, the only reason I would say to use it is if regulatory you have to use it.
yeah. And
The
I think
rest of
the
us,
better question is like, why is this not default? Like, I guess that would be the follow up question to like, it's like
yeah,
just
I
this
mean,
should just
the
be secure by default, right? So, um,
exactly. You should never have to pay for like proper security.
yeah. All right. Well, that's pretty much compute. I'm sure there are like a million other things we missed there, but like we said before, it wasn't like anything. It was a lot of incremental stuff, which is it's just important, but it wasn't anything huge there. Now on the data side, did tend to spend a lot of time here, right? And
Yeah.
they had this idea. I guess I'm going to basically say what they announced was everything now integrates with Redshift. They actually listed out a bunch of other stuff, but basically that's what it came down to, or was sort of like, hey, we can help you get more and more of your data into Redshift through a variety of ways, and once it's there, you can do a lot of analysis in a simpler way. I think that was the overarching message. Like, I don't know. I'm always like confused about like Snowflake and what they do and what Amazon does, but like it kind of felt like, hey, this is just me reading into it. It's like, hey, you don't need to talk to Snowflake. You can like just get all your data into Redshift and we'll help you. That was my overall take on this section. Like, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is clearly, there are simpler Snowflake customers who this will probably be appealing to. People who are like, I don't actually need all that. Amazon is providing, the Amazon basics of Snowflake, and they'll keep raising the water level. So Redshift will cover a lot more use cases, and they'll continue to expand on data lakes and competing with data stacks and all the other vendors in this space. So if you are one of the other vendors in this space, this shouldn't have been unexpected.
Right.
You should expect that Amazon is going to look at the people who make money on their platform and try to take the easy things away. um you know
Now,
and
and to do that, the kudos to the marketing team here. I thought this was a pretty good one. They came out with a message of zero ETL. So basically, they made it sound like, hey, you'll never have to do any type of custom changes to your data to get it integrated with Redshift, which is a fantastic message. Like, who wants ETL? Who wants to mess with this? Of course, nobody does. And my immediate thought is like, that's a great message, and I don't believe it. I immediately was like, I just don't believe it. I just, like, how is this possible? But they went through and they talked about it, but I don't know. I just like my skepticism was, and this is back to like, they didn't get into the details, and I haven't gone through to tell me like exactly what that means. Like, cause I feel like kind of what they're doing is like, well, it's not ETL, but you have to do this other thing, right? It's like kind of how we always, in the end, we always kind of joke, it's always YAML at the end. It's like, oh, wait
yeah,
a minute. I'm not writing this, I'm writing this. And it's still,
it's not ETL. You just have to craft a stored query that is going to roll up all your data daily for us.
I mean,
And
it kind of felt like that, right? And
yeah,
so, so I don't know. I almost would need somebody in the community or something to dig into it and like do it and tell me if they feel like. But I mean, clearly the problem, and that's the thing that they get. And I think overall, that was their whole point about all of this stuff in the data was like, hey, we want to get out of your way. We want to get all the data so that you can query it. And they also talked about like federated querying and not having to move all the data around and be able to pull it, together essentially. So it's clearly all the right pain points. I don't know if my skepticism is warranted on that ETL stuff, but I'm just like, man, I just like, maybe it's just like I'm always getting CSVs sent to me via email. And I'm just like, I want to live in a world where we're all just like looking at the same dashboard and like the data just resides there and people aren't like pulling it out and putting it in their own repository. But like, I want to be in that world. I can't find it. Nowhere I work is never like that. It's always like there's 7 different databases and then there's an export and then there's like an Excel dashboard that gets pasted into PowerPoint. Like, I don't want to be in that world, but every job I have is that world. So if it really does exist, please someone call me. Please let me join.
Well, I mean, there's probably a happy path in there. And there's probably some SMB customers who hit it. That's the thing. It's like, there are, for all of our skepticism, I'm sure that there are customers somewhere in there who it does work, but most of us live in the real world.
All right. So what I'm hearing there is like, we're not going to retire our ETL skills. Let's not give up on knowing that, or at least for the moment. So not yet. Part of the thing, and this is something I think you've got a little experience with, is that, and this actually got a bunch of applause, is that essentially everything has some type of serverless kind of front end, and at least in this data world. I think they had basically they had serverless or Lambda for everything. So I kind of took that to mean it's like, because for a while I've been thinking like serverless is sort of like, it's, I don't know, we don't talk about it as much. I don't see about it as much. People don't ask me about it as much. I felt like maybe that was a fad, but it's like, well, maybe it's just found a home, right? This idea of like, I don't want to say it's just ETL, but it's like, oh, this idea that you got to kind of write some code on top of this to like maybe do a little transform or a little manipulation, is seems like it's very popular. And it seems like this is a place, just because of the applause, and maybe it was just a prompt at the show, but it seemed like, oh, a lot of
there's
people,
a big applause sign.
Maybe so, but I was like, at least
right off camera.
It was like one of the bigger ones. I was like, oh, some people must be really doing this. So like, in your experience with serverless, did you see a lot of it being used in kind of this world of like data transformation?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I don't have real numbers, but I'm glad to make some up. Lambda is probably the largest usage of serverless anywhere, and it's that glue between different Amazon services, pulling things off here, running a calculation and tossing it into there. I mean, people get excited about that. And so eventually everything from Amazon, everything had to become a service with an API, and now everything has to have an API and be accessible via Lambda. To me, that's when Amazon calls things serverless, they just mean, works with Lambda. and in the serverless, crowd, on Twitter and Mastodon or whatever, people are kind of pushing back on what Amazon's calling serverless, because one of those, they announced serverless open search, their Elasticsearch.
That was also got a nice applause.
It got a lot of applause, but then
people are definitely excited about that.
But when you dig into it, it's like, so your serverless database, you still have to pay for it at rest. You're not paying on demand. You're paying to have a database that's running, that has an API that's accessible via Lambda. You still have to pay for your data sitting there. You have to pay for the instances. So there's a minimum spend for serverless OpenSearch. And it's like, that's kind of not the serverless model. The serverless model was supposed to be like paper, call. Right. And if you can't sort how to push your, stuff your data costs into there, then it's not a real serverless, product. And so that, I'm just saying, in the serverless space, there is a little bit of pushback on Amazon just calling everything serverless when they really mean works with Lambda.
Right. Well, I think what you said there before, like, you can call it from Lambda, right? That's sort of maybe.
So maybe, and as Lambda gets bigger and bigger with 10 gigabyte instance, where you can have a container that gets called from Lambda, it becomes even more hand wavy about what serverless is.
Yeah. So maybe maybe the word is just what holds it back. It's like, it is good because it is nice to have an API call from Lambda, right? And it's like, so it's like Lambda. Yeah, it's almost like just give me an endpoint endpoint. Just give me an endpoint that I can call, and that kind of works. I don't care if it's like a big server or not. Like, I don't know. So, all right. The only other thing on the data front, I don't know. People are excited about AWS Glue 4.0. Like, you know, it seems like you got like kind of the latest release of what, Python and some other things. So it's kind of funny because like I kind of feel like this, and correct me if I'm wrong here, man. Like Glue is sort of like one of the ways to do a bunch of analysis and like some data transformation and stuff like that. So it was a little bit like, oh, well, like it's not ETL, but I can use Glue. So I'm like, and it's been upgraded. So I was a little bit like, what are we saying here? Like, do I need to just learn Glue? Do I need to learn ETL? Or are you just kind of giving me a bunch of tools and letting me figure stuff out?
You know, I'm happy for Glue hitting 4.0. Keep it out of the Selewski keynote.
That's right. All right, moving on. That's what we said. All right, security was next. And I think the entire thing here, I'm going to summarize the entire security part to just be like, well, basically Amazon is introducing a SIM, and it's not so surprisingly that it's based on Redshift, right? So it's, you know, they essentially will let you take all of the security events and things that you wanted, and they're now going to support the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework, or OCSF for short there. So you can, you know, essentially take all of this data that's in a known format, throw it in Redshift, and from there you can do a bunch of security analysis. But wait, Matt, that's not all. If you already have a security, you know, console, like a SIM of some kind, you can essentially query that framework or that Redshift instance from your preferred, you know, SIM. So all good stuff, right? All, you know, important things, and it's glad it's there. I don't know, like I wasn't familiar with OCSF, so it seemed like Amazon was like really putting a lot of force behind it. I haven't read anything negative about that. Always up for an open standard of open schema. Like, who doesn't like a good open schema? I mean, the reason you don't like it is it doesn't get adopted. So I have no idea if this is going to be widely adopted or not, but I like the idea. And I don't know if there's behind the scenes, there's a lot of arguments. If there's like a competing framework that I don't know about, I have no idea. So
You're out of that world.
yeah, I haven't been working in that world right now. So these all seem like good things. And it also just seemed like, well, we have Redshift, just throw a whole bunch of data in there. And then they renamed it Amazon Security Lake, right? And I was like, why is everything a lake? Why is everything the same? But fine, whatever. It's all good. It seems like good stuff to me. What I miss? Anything that jumped out at you here?
Nothing. I mean, security, you know, it keeps getting better. Is that okay to say?
That's right. Security, important. Should be getting better. Yeah. And then the only other thing was, I don't know, they have the guard duty, which I've never really used, but I guess just kind of continuing on, you know, everything gets touched by Kubernetes, or vice versa. So everything touches Kubernetes eventually. So now guard duty, which is basically, you know, it'll quote unquote watch what you're doing and like flag for like, you know, malicious behavior. So now it can do it for Kubernetes clusters, which fine, seems solid. You know, it's kind of one of those things. If Coach over here is like, oh, I thought it already did that.
I thought it already did that.
Yeah. Probably that kind of thing.
I mean, you know, at KubeCon, I'm sure there were, you know, half a dozen vendors in this space, you know, trying to, you know, profile your Kubernetes clusters and look for aberrant behavior. But I don't know how you evaluate this, you know, as something you have to pay for. You know, how do you know if it's doing its job? But
it just never alarms, and as long as
it never alarms, or it does alarm, and it's full of, you know, do you go with a 30-day trial? You turn it on and it, you know, figure out if you're all misconfigured. I don't know. It's just kind of a weird. I mean, I guess all security products kind of fit that bill. It's like, is it working or not? What am I paying for? You know,
and more importantly, what does it not find? That's really what you want to know.
Exactly.
Like, okay, what is guard
I mean,
duty
that's kind of the whole
for?
point of all security products is like, you know, the known unknowns versus the unknown unknowns. And so I'm skeptical. You know, if I was running a large EKS, or if I was running a large AWS infrastructure, I'd turn it on for 30 days, but I can't see myself, you know, paying for it if it's, you know, substantially expensive. And if it's not substantially expensive, why are there all those startups in this space?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Okay, well, I think those were all good. So security, good. I think we checked the box on that, and then we'll round it out with. We won't go into all these in details. I would just wanted to kind of make a note of it here is that like clearly Amazon is full on enterprise now. I mean, if that wasn't always the case, it was the case. Like, so they had a full on. I don't know what else to call it. This is like how all product marketers, product marketers go to die. At some point, you're just like, well, let's just call it solutions. Like we got nothing else to say.
Yep,
So it's
yep.
like the solutions that and what I mean is sort of like a broad based set of services and products that solve some type of vaguely defined, business need, right? So the ones that they announced were AWS supply chain, which just seems like right out of their wheelhouse. Like I have to think this is like literally they went to the Amazon.com group and were like, okay, you've figured all this stuff out. Now we're going to package up supply chain and we're going to make it available to everyone. So that one seemed, while I don't personally need it, or I'm not totally sure like what to do, but it seemed like for sure, like if you were looking at an SAP or an Oracle or something like that, it's like AWS clearly has some bona fides in this area, and I think you would definitely take a look at that. So it's like they went in through and they talked about it, and I was like,
I mean, is there a lot of greenfields in this space? I don't know.
But this is where the keynote sort of goes off. It's like I have no idea of the 200,000 people that were watching yesterday, like how many of us were like, yep, I need to go. You know what I mean? This seems like such a specific
I need some
area.
supply chain. And this is probably one of the more accessible things they announced.
Right. Well, let me go on. Then they announced AWS Clean Room, which again, like vaguely was a way to like bring all the data together from multiple parties that essentially can't trust each other or can't show each other data. And then he used the example of advertising. I was like, ooh, I don't know. It's like, I don't know if you want to be using that example. Basically, you could pull together what sounded like cohorts or, profiles from two different groups. And then, we could all get better ads. Again, I was like, just being more.
I'll put this with my satellite service and I got a startup idea.
Right. And but this is the whole thing about to like, I always want to come back to like, I'm seeing this from like one area. So like, this is why I'm like, it's not that I don't think these things are important, but I'm just like, again, there's 200,000 people. I'm talking about both there and online watching. And it's like, how many of us even like know, like you have to educate me on this problem before I can even like get to the point of like understanding what I would even need in a solution.
Well, it's just a matter of time before this turns into like, General Motors doing a keynote or something where you're like, okay, let's talk about wind turbines. And now we're going to talk about, some other product that they do that I have nothing, they're just going to have all these niches that they feel like they need to give some time that are so inaccessible to the rest of us.
Well, Matt, that brings me to the AWS Sim Space Weaver, which, of course, like I know you know what that is, but let me just define it for everyone else. It's a new fully managed compute service that helps you deploy large-scale spatial simulations in the cloud. And I'm just like, I honestly, I don't know. It had something to do with like factory floors. And like, I literally at this point, I was like, I don't even know. Like, I mean, this again, you could tell me this is a $7 billion industry. And I'd be like, I believe you, and I have no idea what I would do with this.
That ML is just spitting out press releases, and I have no way of
right. So this whole section, and I guess this was under like the possibility section, right? And this is where we like he kind of went in. I already mentioned it. Like went through like Lord of the Rings, and then the Lord of the Rings. Like he actually immediately bridged to Amazon Connect, which is like the call center stuff, which I thought was so funny. I was just like, yeah, that's what we're always thinking about. Lord of the Rings.
Big idea with the trolls.
We're thinking about like the Shire, and just the whole. It was just crazy. So this part, like, I don't, Oh, and then there was Amazon Optics, which got even more obscure.
Not Optics, Omics.
Omics. See, that's how bad I couldn't even say it. It was a new purpose-built service that helps healthcare and life science organizations store, query, and analyze genomic, and I'm not going to read the rest of these scientific words, data. And it was like, again, could not be happier this exists. No idea what I would do with it. So
it would replace that Raspberry Pi cluster in your closet.
So, but maybe this is just the point. It's like, all of these things are important businesses. I don't know. Either they belong in the keynote, in a different keynote, or the keynote needs to be restructured, or you need to give them more time. Because I think most of us, I'm just going to be the stand-in for the audience. Like most of us did not know if we have these problems, we don't know about these problems. And I don't think most of us are going to be in the position to like affect a buying decision around this anytime soon. So the whole solution stuff, the fact that it was kind of like, I don't want to say it was like duct taped at the end, but it was just like, this is weird. Like, we've been here for an hour and a half, and like, you
Couldn't you
just
stick
talked.
that in the miscellaneous keynote?
It kind of was. And it sort of at the end, it was like, you told me about the ponies that died in the South Pole. And then you told me about Lord of the Rings. And then we're now talking about a sim space weaver. And I was like, I feel like we may have lost the plot. Like, I'm a little lost and I'm tired.
Yeah.
So that was it. And then of course
it's truly the gifted orator that can bring the ponies and the sim space thing together.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I didn't quite understand it all. So yeah, so the solutions, I'm going to leave that. The rest, everyone else, you can go read about them on your own, because frankly, that's what I had to do. I didn't know what any of them were. So maybe they're important, but like you said, Matt, I think this is, it's important. Next year, I believe the solutions, there should be a solutions keynote, and it should be on a different day. And I probably won't watch that one. I'll just admit it right now. I'm probably not like, I don't care if there's SimSpace 2.0. I don't need it. I do not care. So, but overall, I mean, I do think maybe the biggest takeaway was like kind of status quo, like, because the stuff that I think we really do care about, compute, storage, like I didn't even hear anything that much about storage, right? I didn't hear anything about S3 for the most part. I think that didn't make the keynote and things like that. So it's probably in some ways it's a testament to like the primitives, which we always talk about, like the databases, this compute, storage, networking. I think it's all that actually all works really, really well. And I think it's clearly the business is growing. I still think that's the lion's share of the revenue. They're in those services. And, I think if that's what you're doing, it's like you probably are going to get a lot of good enhancements, but you didn't get anything that was earth shattering. That's kind of my final take on the keynote. What's your final take?
That's it. Tighten it up and, push more content out into other keynotes, and, just don't make me read about someone sitting through 2 hours of this.
That's right. Okay. All right. Well, let's say, hey man, we're running out of time, but I thought we'd do a new segment here called Ask Software Defined Talk. Well, really, someone just posted a good question in the Slack, and I was like, why not? Why don't we just talk about it? So the question was broadly this from Owen. It says he's in the infrastructure engineering space, and he's got one application owner is looking to upgrade their business application. That's a good thing. And the target version required Kubernetes to run. The twist here is that the app vendor also has a Kubernetes distribution and will only support the application if it runs on that distribution. And then he goes on to say that this is not the only app we have that has specific requirements on the Kubernetes cluster it runs on. One requires a specific cluster controller, another app, a specific ingress controller. So I think it's got an interesting question, right? Because like this is a variation of like supported operating systems. The old one, it's like, hey, like what operate, like, you can't just say
it's the new, it's the new,
it's like the new Linux. Like what do you support? Red Hat, or like which distribution?
Red Hat, maybe, you branched out into SUSE, but we don't support that, Ubuntu nonsense.
So I feel like we should come down, like we should have an opinion. Like, what do we think of this, right? Because I think there's two things that are going on here. One, as Owen alluded to, is like one, it's self-serving by some vendors to be like, use our Kubernetes version because we also provide you that. So basically, you're bundling it together.
But that's that's like Oracle only working on Oracle Linux,
right?
That's not very.
All right, so let's set that one to the side, and then there's the other one. It's just a more realistic one on the vendor side. It's like, listen, I can't possibly support every variation of
absolutely.
I just haven't tested it, right? And and that may be the more honest answer. It's like we can help you run it, or you can run it, you can set it up, but we haven't tested it, so we just don't know. I mean, that's kind of what I think the vendor is trying to say here.
Oh man, yeah. As a someone who works at a Kubernetes vendor, at least half of our support load is dealing with the vagaries of variations in the platform. Let alone the fact that Kubernetes is on a fairly tight upgrade window schedule. They're releasing, is it every 6 months, every 9 months? But they're putting out new releases fast, which means the clouds are usually a release or two behind. They're not running. I think 1.2.5 is current. As far as I know, nobody's running that in production yet. But we have customers who are like, oh, I'm running 1.2.5. What are you going to do about all these deprecation warnings? I'm like, well, we'll fix those, but you don't see that if you're on Amazon yet. So it's good to have the bleeding edge people, but then you have folks who are 6, 7, 8 releases back because the vendor, their cloud platform is happy to support them. They're like, oh yeah, well, you can keep running this for another 5 years, and then you're like, as a vendor of a product that works on Kubernetes, like that ties me to that boat anchor of backwards compatibility, which anyone who's worked with operating systems is already familiar with this. We were supporting Windows 2003 for 2 decades or whatever, but that's it. And then that's just like Kubernetes. Then you have to worry about ingress controllers, service meshes. You have to worry about storage engines. It's luckily, quote unquote, luckily, you don't see a lot of problems with the Kubernetes platform itself. Most of the APIs are fairly standardized. You don't see people, there's like Tanzu isn't bringing in a whole bunch of like weird APIs that, you need to use. Kubernetes itself is pretty stable, but all the things you mix in make it harder. So your support matrix is pretty complicated, because if you say it works on Kubernetes, that's like saying it works on Linux.
I think maybe that's where, like, to just maybe give like kind of an answer nobody wants. It's like, at the end of the day, you as the consumer of this application, right? Like, you kind of have to decide for yourself. It's like, okay, there are benefits to being standardized and always just running, like, your organization just running one variation of, or one specific version of Kubernetes, and making sure everything is supported on that. And so in that case, you can assert back to that vendor, be like, we're not buying it unless you support this way. And in some cases, I think it's worth doing that. And I think you say that the kind of, this is the old school, like, identity management. It's like, at some point, it's like, if you don't offer integration via Active Directory, we're not going to put it in here, right? It's just not, because it's just like, we can't have another silo. Or, you have to determine that the business value this application brings to the table, sort of is worthy, and it's worth it to go out and support a specific operating, or in this case, Kubernetes version, because we're getting so much business value. But I do think, like, if I was the CIO, I would sort of keep like this running list of, like, I'd call it like my if you will, my special applications, or the ones that are sort of like are non-standard. And you kind of keep the list almost on your whiteboard, and say, okay, every year you look through and be like, can we get this thing off that standard version, or can we get off that application? Because you do have to own it. Otherwise, as you alluded to, we end up with these Windows 2003 and this Windows 2008 situation where it goes so long that it becomes an island completely of itself, right? So it's like,
Absolutely.
I think you as an IT person have to decide that. So I think we're giving Owen sort of the, like, the consultative answer is like, well, at some point you got to look that application under an eye and be like, how much you really want this? And someone, and like somebody kind of has to win that argument. Like, listen, I'm the business and this is going to make us $100 million. I'm all in. If it's this is one of 50 other solutions we could have bought, and there are a lot of simpler ones, like, I think maybe you go to option 2 and be like, just live with it.
Well, so I'm, not revealing anything about the inner workings of kubectl, but we have to deal with Prometheus, and we ship bog standard Prometheus, and then of course there are half a dozen products that implement Prometheus APIs, and that is its own level of hassle. But we're kind of, as a startup, too small to push back on a lot of choices at this point, right? We're like happy to bring in customers and deal with it. We haven't really solved it yet, but I think the magic unicorn for us that solves things is SaaS. Once, if you could take installation away from customers, that's the real win. If instead of like letting them choose all the variations of having to deal with their platform, you're like, look, we'll just run it for you. That's a silver bullet, hopefully. But yeah, it's really just a question of like balancing how much your support costs with how much those customers are bringing in.
Yeah, no, I think you said it right. So, all right, Owen, well, we've given you the definitive answer. And if anyone else has a question they would like us to answer, you can either post it in the Slack, or you can send it to questions@softwaredefinedtalk.com, and we'll try to answer pretty much any question on any subject, at least any subject that's like of reasonable
Bring it.
reasonableness. And now, and I intentionally, I'm not going to define reasonableness. We will just decide when we want to. Now, if you have other questions, or maybe you want to see how other people are doing stuff, maybe you should go to some of these conferences that are upcoming. We've got the DAT conference. That's here in Texas. That's January 15th through the 18th. You can use code SDT for 5% off. You can also, if you're figuring out security and you need to see what's going on, you can go to Cloud Native Security Con in North America. That's in Seattle. It's February 1st and 2nd. And then good friend of the show, Michael, I think he's involved in organizing the latest DevOps Day, Birmingham. That's Birmingham, Alabama. Roll Tide, War Eagle, depending on where you live. So that will be April 20th through 21st. And I believe they are still accepting, submissions, call for proposal talks, things like that. So if you put in your submission, he'll probably select you. Hey, if you went to the Slack, I bet you Michael would even potentially, talk to you and give you a heads up of like the kinds of sessions they're looking for. So check all of those conferences out. Also wanted to thank a few people. I sent Chris in Rhode Island. I believe he's the first one in Rhode Island. Not a big state. I don't think we have but I think he's the first person to get a sticker. So it was good to hear from him. I think it's I don't know how to say it.
Are there any states we're missing?
Probably, but I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't think like a Wyoming. I don't think we've gotten that, a Wyoming or Alaska.
Come on,
for
Cheyenne.
sure. Maybe we have done Hawaii. I know we've done Puerto Rico, and I know Puerto Rico is not a state, but I did send one there once. Trin, and I think he's in Oklahoma, so I sent him a sticker. If you would like a sticker, all you have to do is send your mailing address to stickers@softwaredefinedtalk.com, and I will be happy to send you a sticker anywhere in the world. Also, from the community, from the Slack, I think it's Sudesh. Unfortunately, a lot of people, there's a lot of talk about layoffs. That's sad for all of us, but Sudesh actually shared a list of tech companies that are hiring. So it's an Airtable list. So I put a link in here. So if you're looking for a job, it's a list of a whole bunch of tech companies hiring pretty much around the world for a whole bunch of roles. So it's if you're maybe starting your job search, if you can, maybe just wait till after the holidays to start your job search. That's my recommendation. But if you start, maybe get your emails going now, but get your interviews set up for like January. That's what I would do. But you can maybe get a look at some of the companies that are hiring. And then of course it's end of the year, Matt. So it's what the people want. We're gonna be doing our big end of year extravaganza. It's the show that nobody wants but us, where we just really talk about whatever we want. That's even more unstructured than this show. So if you would like to ask us any question on any subject, just send us questions at softwaredefinedtalk.com, and I'll be happy to send you. In that case, I'm not going to send you a sticker. I'll send you that if you want, but also I'll compile the list of questions and answer them at that episode. Good chance if you email, I would say most of the time we get to most of the questions. So sometimes people, I know they're like, are people going to read this email? Yeah, we'll read the email. And as long as the question's like reasonable, I will probably get in. So if you've ever wanted to know anything from Matt Ray, what it's like to live in Australia, Dutch cheese, pets, what am I missing, Matt? Raspberry Pis, we have all of those subjects and more covered, but for sure. And then finally, last plug here, if you would like to see more behind the scenes, you should watch the YouTube channel. And I think last week Cote and Andrew Clay Schaefer, I think there was some behind the scenes about podcasting on it, and I think there was some behind the scenes about cheese and stuff, so and tacos. So if you wanted that content and it wasn't in the podcast episode, go watch it on YouTube. You'll hear more about it. So
good episode.
Having said all of that, Matt, what is your recommendation this week?
I've got a pair of recommendations. One of my longtime favorite bands is Talking Heads, and there's a really, really good cover from Kishibashi that of This Must Be the Place. I linked that in the show notes, so check that out. Classical quartet, just great. And then folks following along might have heard I was buying a car. I ended up going through Karma, which is an online car purchasing site here in Australia, and it worked out pretty well. I'm pretty happy with my car. The experience worked well, so I'm happy to give them a recommendation and throw in a referral code if you end up buying a car through them.
Well done. Help Matt pay for his car by using his referral
Exactly.
code. That's it's good. And what was the car again? It was
I bought a 2019 Nissan X-Trail.
wow, that's like practically brand new for you. That's pretty late model. You're like,
It replaced a 2007 Volvo XC90. So
okay,
yeah,
all right.
it's my kids remarked, "Hey, the ceiling liner is attached in this one."
That's right. Hey kids, you want to go to college or you want to drive in a nice car? Pick one. It's your decision. So that's
Yes,
good. Well,
it's
good.
pretty nice. I'm pretty happy.
Good. Glad you did it, Matt. I know buying a car, never fun. Well, if you're riding around in your new car and you want something to listen to, I'm going to recommend an episode of the Acquired podcast where they do a lot of like history of different kind of, companies and tech trends and things like that. But this one was the complete history and strategy of Qualcomm. So I really think of Qualcomm mostly as like a patent troll. I don't know if that was wrong. Like that was sort of my like attitude going in, but like it's actually a long history of like all the things that they did and all the different chips that they built. And if you're old enough to remember like early cell phones like CDMA and TDMA and like are you on AT&T or on your Verizon? So like they kind of take you through the whole history of like how all these chips got created and then how Qualcomm came to own all of these patents and like why even to this day, Qualcomm still gets paid on a lot of phones. So I was like, it's a pretty long episode. It's kind of it's geeky, nerdy, a lot of chip talk. So if you're interested in that and find it interesting, you should definitely check it out. And it's something that probably good for a long plane ride or a long road trip. So check out that episode. All right. Well, if you've been listening this long, we appreciate it. If you would like to see all of the things that we talked about and some of the links that we didn't, you can go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/389. That'll have a full list of the show notes. And in most podcast players, all the show notes will be there right now. So I always wonder if people actually look at them, but they're all there. If you want to like follow along or click some links, definitely check it out. And let me throw something else we never talked about. There's in some podcast players, there are chapter markers. So if you've never used chapter markers, if you look down and you see like a list of topics, you can actually just kind of like, if you will, hit the advance button and like move around. So if you got tired of hearing about AWS, you could have advanced and heard about asking SDT. And of course, like we just assume you listen to it all, but you don't have to tell us if you're skipping around. I don't want to know. That's fine. That's between you and your podcast player. And with that, we will talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.
All right. It was a good episode. I did see, I don't know if he's still online. Barton, friend of the show, Barton says that he sure enough, he sent me a link. He went to school with I think he sent us both with Mr. Adam Slepsky. So, there it is. Barton could have been the next CEO of AWS, but instead he chose to hang out on this podcast. I think he made the better choice, right? I mean, don't you think that was
we just celebrated 10 years of the Ubuntu laptop from Dell. That's all Barton.
That's true. That was actually that in itself. That's right. So
I'd go to that keynote.
If you're using a Dell laptop that runs Linux, you should probably call Barton and be like, yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for making that happen. So good job. Good job, Barton. I think that was it. It's pretty much it. So appreciate everybody watching as always. That's always good. Hopefully we're going to be going into the holiday season. So we'll do a couple more episodes for sure. We may pop up on earlier in the week as we record a couple episodes for kind of in the in the can, if you will, for the holiday season. Maybe you'll hear an interview by Matt Ray. Maybe it'll stream, maybe it won't. We'll have to see. So we'll do a couple different things. But of course, we always thank everyone for hanging out with us. So, all right, streamers, with that, we'll talk to you next week around the same time, around the same day.